All right, Josh Smith here again at my studio live from Flat 5. And today I'm talking to a really good friend of mine and a great guitar player. He's here in Los Angeles, California. We've been friends for a few years. He's a certified guitar nerd like me and like everybody else. He lives, breathes, sleeps guitar, and he's an incredible player. He's played with a lot of great artists, does a lot of sessions, knows all the gear that's happening in the world. And he just recently toured with Jackson Brown last year, which is exciting. And Jackson's one of my favorite artists, and that's a band with a lot of my friends in that band. So, dude, you're just one of my favorite players, and you're a great guy. It's a pleasure to have you. Mason Stoops, everybody.
Man, thank you, Josh. I appreciate the intro.
Oh, dude, of course, man. So it's been interesting talking to all my friends and kind of finding out their path, to the instrument. And some had parents that played, some didn't. Some had big brothers that played. Some was completely random. I'm curious, how the guitar ended up in your hands to begin with. What was the initial spark?
It was funny. I didn't really grow up in a musical family. My dad raced cars, and my mom was just a really great mom for us. And I there was a piano in the house. I remember that much, but otherwise, guitar didn't really hit me until maybe eighth or ninth grade. I had an art teacher who would get me into, he'd be playing music in the classroom, and then immediately afterwards he would give me a sticky note with different bands that we'd listen to, and that was my first kind of intro into music. And so after a while of that, I was like, all right, I really want to play. And a lot of that stuff early on, what got me going was like Fugazi and Green Day and a lot of punk bands, just because of this teacher. But I decided at one point I wanted to play bass guitar. It's like
Uh-huh.
there was a solo that I'd heard on a record, and I was convinced it was a bass solo. So I asked my mom for a bass guitar, and she didn't know what that was. So Christmas morning, I got a red, like fake, like Chinese, like Strat copy,
Yeah.
and I couldn't, what are you supposed to say? You can't be like, wow, this is really, you're two strings away.
Yeah.
But so I didn't want to say anything. It's like, all right, I'll play guitar. But going up to that point, I liked drawing a lot. I had a lot of things I was kind of semi interested in, but there was this moment when I came down. I woke up before everybody that Christmas morning, and I saw the guitar, and I held it there, and I remember putting my fingers. I'd never even really held one before, but like putting them directly on the frets, thinking that was how you're supposed to. Man, this is hard. But I went back to bed. So no one else was awake, but it was like this just like electricity had gone through me. And it's like, I'm gonna be a guitar player now. Like it just was so clear. It was like so. I was so sure of it, and it just it's felt like that ever since. That feeling's never gone away, but it was there instantly. And so that's kind of how the guitar came into my life, and it's hasn't gone away since.
Man, and how old were you that year? What year was that?
I think I was 13 years old. I was born in 91. So
Okay.
what year? I don't. The math,
Yeah.
the numbers out there, but
Yeah. Man, well, it's been interesting talking to guys older than me, same generation as me, and then younger guys than me. A lot of commonalities come out between the generations. And one I've heard from guys your generation is Green Day has been really important actually with a
huge,
lot of people from your generation, which
huge.
is I understand it. Like I get it. It's very but it's cool to hear coming from a lot of different people.
No, I'm glad you said that because that has been a uniting front where I think everyone wants to play cool for a while, and especially when you first meet, a few other guitar players, you might talk about pickups, you might talk about, you'll say all the right things, and at some point someone will bring up Green Day, and it's like this sigh of relief. Everyone's like, oh yes, I love Green Day,
Yeah.
and Billy Joe Armstrong was, yeah, he was my first guitar hero. I mean, that's just what the idea that image in my mind of that music and that sound with him on stage and that Les Paul Jr. or that early Strat that was covered in
Yeah.
stickers. I mean, that was it for me. It was like guitar is cool. That confirmed it.
Absolutely, man. So then what was next? Did they get you a book? Did they take you for lessons, or did you just start figuring stuff out?
I mostly started figuring some stuff out. I was obsessed. I mean, I spent. I mean, like I think any of us, it was just this immediate life transformation where every minute of my time went into practicing and playing and learning and listening to records and playing along to them. And finally, I think a year into it, my mom was like, if you really want to take this seriously, like, you have to get a guitar teacher.
Mhm.
So I started going to this guy named Adam Speth, who was a session player back in the 60s, and really great guy. Always, he had to have a joke every time he came in the studio ready for him because he expected a joke. And he's who got me. I give him so much credit for kind of setting me on the path that led to where I am now musically, because I would get to my lessons early and I would hear him in his studio giving another lesson, and it sounded like there's two or three guitars going on. I never heard that before, and so I was sure that there was multiple people in there, but what he was doing was like Travis picking, Chet Atkins, Jerry Reed, that style of playing, and I'd never heard of that, and he's who kind of got me onto that, and that was kind of the beginning of, the first when the snowball got pushed off the side of the mountain, and so Adams who kind of set me on the fingerstyle path, him and being super into Mark Knopfler, which I got into
Right.
relatively quickly after picking up the guitar.
And what kind of music did your parents listen to in the house? Was that an influence, or were you on your own?
It's funny. I mean, my dad listened to a lot of. We had some Mark Knopfler solo albums. There was some Paul Simon. There was a lot of Elton John,
Hmm.
a lot of Celine Dion,
Okay.
a lot of Billy Joel. So songwriters,
Yeah.
um, and but Dire Straits didn't really enter my life well after I had gotten into Mark Knopfler as a solo artist, and so it took me a while to realize, like, why do people keep bringing up Dire Straits, this like random band, when I told them that I really like Mark Knopfler? Because to me, he was a totally
Yeah.
different guy.
Yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah. Okay, so so you're taking lessons.
Yeah,
I'm assuming you progressed fast, like all of us, because you're obsessed. You're
yeah,
spending every waking minute playing guitar, and and we love it. And it becomes the main thing. School kind of goes to the side. Everything else
yeah.
goes to the side. And so, when does the next transition happen? Like, when do you start maybe making music with friends? Does a garage band happen, or do you start playing? What's the next situation?
I think guitar. It had taken over my life to the point that I transferred into this classical guitar program at the high school I went to. I was studying film and television the year before. I went to this school, this Orange County High School of the Arts, which is this charter school in downtown Santa Ana. And but originally I'd gone there for drawing, and then I switched to film and television. But at that same time is when I picked up the guitar, and it was actually a film teacher there who handed me the flyer for the guitar program that was coming out the next year. Because I spent every day in the back of the classroom, I had this one acoustic guitar I would take with me to school every day. And
Wow.
he was kind of like, you might want to consider leaving this film program because he meant well, but it was
Right.
um, yeah. So he kind of pushed me into the classical guitar program, and I'd never played classical or really knew anything about it, but I was very lucky to have a teacher in that program, this Vasil Chikardзakov, who's one of three famous brothers from Bulgaria, famous classical guitar players. They're in a group called Triada, and they left their fame in Bulgaria to play music in the U.S. And he was my teacher and really inspired me and pushed me to keep playing. I remember it was through him that I found out what a session player even was, like, because I'd already decided. I mean, we're talking like 11th grade, 12th grade now. I definitely decided that I wanted to be that I was going to be a guitar player. Like that's that conversation's over.
Right.
But I didn't know that there was such a thing as a session musician, like, and I remember the day that he kind of explained it to me, that like there's guys who go out and they go into the studios and they record on people's songs, and that was kind of cool, and I kind of put that in the back of my mind. But I think it was around the time that It Might Get Loud. I don't know if you saw that movie or if you watched
Yeah.
it 20
Absolutely.
times
Yeah.
like I did. But seeing Jimmy Page on the big screen with this Les Paul, there's that one scene where it's just him and the Les Paul plugged into these
Hmm.
big Rickenbacker amps. And I had worked in this record in this shop called Pepperland Music, and I was around a lot of good music and old records. and but Zeppelin hadn't really hit me yet. And after that movie, I got in my car and put on Zeppelin One, and that was kind of the moment of like, okay, I want to be in a band. And so me and my friends started trying to put together different bands and trying to do Zeppelin covers, trying to do anything that I could to sound like Jimmy Page. Um, and I liked that Jimmy Page was kind of also a tinkerer, and I grew up
Oh yeah.
taking things apart and putting them back together, and working on cars with my dad and my grandpa, and that's part of I think that was also the appeal to the electric guitar, because it was like, man, it made sense to me, screws and knobs and bolts, and it's like, this is, you could really hot rod these things, and seeing someone who I really idolized like Jimmy Page being really into, the different tricks he would do to his guitars, and taking covers off of pickups or adding different switches, and the stuff he would do in the studio, it just, that kind of, the connection of those two worlds kind of made sense to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but as far as like the next step, I knew I wanted to go and keep playing guitar. I'd had a few punk bands that I tried to, make happen when you're 16 or 17. And at some point, I decided I wanted to go to Berklee College of Music, and but I needed a scholarship. I needed some way to make it happen, but I didn't end up going. I left high school early,
Mhm.
in senior year, and that was actually, this is a great tangent, because I left because of like a real, I was sad because of a girlfriend who had left me. It's like, I don't want to be in school anymore. I just want to travel and play guitar. So I left school, and that very next January was my first NAM. That music store I worked at, that music shop, got me a NAM pass. So I went from being sad and feeling alone like any teenager would, to walking into the doors of NAM, which I had no idea what I was getting in for. And you're one of the few guitar players I know, and we've talked about this a lot, that we love NAM.
Yeah.
And the people, and just the energy, and just the new things every year, and that was my first experience of it. And it was at NAM that I met so many pedal companies and gear companies for the first time. And this was maybe 2009, so a lot of the major pedal companies weren't even there yet. But
Right.
um, that energized me, and I felt like I'd met this new family of people who were just like me, and loved gear and loved guitar. And it was through those experiences that I started doing demos at NAM, and then I met Jamie and Julie at Earthquaker, who I owe so much to for uh, what I have now really comes from what I learned from them. They would fly me around with them to different parts of the country to demo their pedals for different guitar stores and Guitar Center, and then at some point they asked me if I wanted to demo for different producers around LA, so that they were trying to get their pedals in studios and in producers' hands, and so I started
Right.
meeting a lot of producers in LA, and through that kind of is where the momentum started for my session career. And but it all came from NAM. It all came from being sad about an ex-girlfriend and going to NAM.
Yeah. Well, I mean, guitar players and just the LA, professional musician community has a very jaded point of view when it comes to NAM. Oh man, I'm going only one day for a couple hours, shake the hands I need to shake, and I'm fucking out of there. And I've always been the opposite of that, and it's because number one, I just love the stuff, but number two, my first experience was similar. I went when I was 13 for the first time as a bar
Yeah,
mitzvah gift, and it was like mind blowing to me that I could be in this giant place and pick up any guitar in the world almost. At least
yeah.
it felt that way as a kid. And then the next thing I knew, I bump into Steve Morse in line for the bathroom. And then, of course, we'd bump into Stevie Wonder because you can't not see Stevie Wonder at NAMM. And you'd bump into whoever, and it was like, as a 13-year-old, this is the greatest thing on earth.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I've never lost that feeling about NAMM. But I was going to ask you, your classical guitar teacher in school. It's
Yeah,
really awesome that he was open enough to at least like share with you the possibilities available to you as a working guitar player, because a lot of classical teachers kind of poo-poo anything that is not in their purview. So
yeah.
you were lucky to have that kind of
Extremely
even
lucky.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't a traditional classical player. I mean, I was so new to it, and especially I'd only been playing for a couple of years when I auditioned for the program. And after my audition, he came and told my mom, he's like, it's a little rough, but like, the passion is there and the talent is there, and he gave me a shot. And he always really encouraged us to, be ourselves, be the best we can. But he wasn't a stickler in ways that he probably should have been, or at least most, like you said, most classical teachers are.
Mhm.
I couldn't grow my nails out without biting them, and I had this half classical, half Travis picking right hand that I could
Yeah.
never quite get a grip on, and he was okay with that. He really embraced um, me and the music that I liked, and really encouraged that. And I really do feel strongly that if I wasn't as lucky as I was to have a teacher like him who was as open minded as he was, I probably would have just burnt out.
Yeah.
And so it really, the relationships you build along the way are so crucial, and that's, like just going back to NAM, the people you meet and the friends you make there. It's like that's real to me.
Oh,
I
dude,
owe a lot of stuff to that.
the initial way that something gets presented to you is so responsible for the way that you take that into your life. So it's like
100%.
I remember clearly the first time I had jazz presented to me, it was by like jazz snobs who were looking down on my love of blues. And so that influenced me for a great while to be like fuck jazz. Like I
Yeah,
don't want to play that bullshit. And it wasn't until a nicer person sat me down and said, as a 13-year-old, hey, you're already doing some of this stuff. Let me show you what you're doing there and explain this to you. And let me show you what Miles Davis is doing on a blues, and it was like, oh, this is really cool. But it is that the initial way that you meet
context.
something is directly responsible for how you bring it into your life.
No, it's so true. Yeah, how something is presented, and the way it's presented, who's telling it to you, and how you feel about it. Then there's so many variables that could long term affect your perception of these things. And
Absolutely. Hell, if
I
your mom had bought you a bass, you might be Jaco Pastorius right now, and we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
that's true. It's 100% true. It's I love it though. Those variables.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's what makes us all unique, and makes everybody's pathway different. So, when you decided to leave school, and
Yeah,
then also decided not to go to Berkeley or to go to college for music, were your parents freaking out?
kind of. I did go to Fullerton College for almost a whole semester. That was
Okay.
there's a applied music program there ran by a professor named Joe Jewell. He's a monster guitar player
Yeah, yeah.
and very intimidating guy. And so at the time that I went to Fullerton, I was still telling my parents and also kind of myself that like, no, I'll make college work. I'll figure it out. And Joe and I butted heads in more in just too many ways, and I got into that program because of a recommendation by my classical teacher, Vasile.
Okay.
But Joe is one of these guys. All respect to him. We're friends now, but at the time he was definitely like kind of a traditionalist. And I would show
Mhm.
up to a private lesson having transcribed a Wes Montgomery solo the night before, and we'll go to start playing, and he'll stop me and say, "Well, where's your pick?" I said, "Well, I can't use a pick. I still can't really use a pick today." And he wouldn't even let me, play because I didn't learn it with the pick. But Wes Montgomery used his thumb, so I've got
Yeah.
four times the advantage on that guy. I thought, but it was in that period of time that I was still figuring out how to get to Berkeley. What am I going to do with college? That I got through a weird, almost Craigslist kind of website. I got offered a gig up in LA for a Sony Records artist who at the time was kind of more of a country thing, and now she's a much larger and successful pop artist. But they needed an auxiliary player, and
Mhm.
they'd asked me, they'd seen some YouTube videos of some video demos I'd done for Eastwood guitars. Everything comes back to NAMM, but
Yeah.
and I had been playing this kind of dobro style guitar, and I played a banjo-ish thing, and they're like, we need an auxiliary player who's young, and would you be interested in coming and auditioning? It's like, absolutely. But I didn't really play banjo, so when I came to the audition, I said, man, you'll never guess what happened. I was loading up my car, and I dropped the banjo, and I just couldn't bring it. But I did bring my, resonator, which kind of sounds like a banjo. Like, okay, that's fine. I really wanted that gig. I really wanted a real gig. My the advice of my Berkeley representative, who was trying to figure out how to get me in there. When I told her that had this opportunity with this artist and this gig, she was like, "Take the gig. You're going to go to Berkeley. You're going to learn music for 4 years, and then you're going to probably go back to LA and try to get that gig that you got offered right now. Take it. If it doesn't pan out, you could always go back to school."
Right.
So I listened to her, and that was my first experience, both on a professional gig and my first experience playing with really incredible professional musicians. And I remember how intimidated I was the first day, and then a week later, how much better I felt at guitar just from learning from people who were better than me and
Yep.
playing with people who are better than you. And that made me realize how important it is to try to stay the worst player in the band because you,
Yep.
you
Yep.
just learn quick.
Yeah, I mean, fear is the best motivator. Being the guy in the room that everybody thinks is going to fuck up, the least experienced cat, you make sure that you don't drop the ball, or otherwise maybe this business isn't right for you. But I,
Yeah,
I remember being in those rooms my whole life as the young guy, full of a room of amazing musicians, and not wanting to let them down, basically, or embarrass myself, quite honestly.
yeah,
I mean, there's no, you know, there is no, whatever. There's no thing that gives you more experience than those situations, being around better musicians and real world practical application. So I mean, you said
100%.
in a week you felt like a better guitar player. It works that fast.
It
It
does.
really does. Yeah.
And it's important to keep pushing yourselves into those environments because you meet new people, you you pick up on little things, just little cues that I think, as you know, now 10 years, 12 years later, we take for granted. We all know how to end a tune, we all know how to follow the pocket, or it's something we've gotten better at it. I'm certainly always trying to get better at it, but those initial things that they don't teach you in music school, or they don't even really talk about, as how to really
Yep.
play with the band, how to be dynamic, how to sit in the mix. Like you
Yep.
have to learn those from experience, and so I'm really thankful for those experiences that kicked my ass.
Yep. Yep. Whenever anybody asks me what's the best thing I could do to get better, it's like, well, dude, take every gig you can possibly take.
Yeah,
It's like nothing grows you quicker than being on a job. Nothing. There's no substitute.
yeah. It was from there. The bass player in that band asked me if I had played country music at all, and I lied and I said, totally. I play country music all the time.
Right.
Great, we've got this country cover band, and our guitar player dropped out, and we need one, and would you want to come audition? I said, sure. And I, like you said, those situations, here I've just put myself in this situation where I have to learn 40 something country tunes. I've never played
Right.
country music in my life, but I learned the shit out of those songs, and I worked hard to get that audition, and it was from that opportunity that I started playing in this country band, and we would play every weekend around down in Riverside. It was we do 2 4-hour sets. It was
Yep.
so people could line dance, and it was so much work, and it was so much soloing. And I'm so thankful for it. Talk about something else that like I fell into and owe a lot to, because country. I mean, it's the most guitar-driven music I think that's still on the radio. Like it's all about the rhythm guitar. It's all about, I mean, Brent Mason, just the stuff that he can put on a record, or Tom Bukovac, those guys,
Yep.
learning their riffs and those solos, and having to perform those every night. I learned a lot quickly from doing those country gigs, but I needed a telly, and that's kind of where this telly comes from, because I bought it a couple years before from a guy in Brea, California, and it was just a normal white telly. I think I paid $700 for it, and then in trying to modify it, I cut through a wire on accident, and I felt really bad. I didn't know enough about guitars, so it kind of sat apart for a couple years. The body was the base to my drill press for like a year and a half, and I lost the original neck. And but when I started doing those country gigs, and they're like, "Hey, you should probably get a Telecaster," I was like, "I have most of a Telecaster somewhere."
Yeah.
I put this guitar back together, and it's been my main guitar ever since.
Yep.
But that came from those country gigs, which came from that weird pop gig, which came from going to NAMM. So
Yep. Well, I mean, and that's the way it works as a working musician. I mean, you have to be open to every opportunity, not turn anything down, and then really grab it when it's presented to you.
yeah,
And you don't know where it's going to end up, but I mean, I mean, it's difficult enough to make a living doing this, so you have to just go the way it goes.
Yeah, I'm still going. I think I'm still trying to go the way it goes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Dude, the Telecaster, I mean, it was the same for me. I was a Strat guy my whole life, and I had a gig that required Telecaster, and I had ordered an Esquire, actually, a pine body Esquire, because I had played like the Fender limited edition Esquire prototype, like the 50 reissue, the snake headstock, pine body. And I wanted that, so I had ordered that. I'd had tellies over the years and sold them. And, anyways, this gig came along, and I needed a telly fast. And the person who I'd ordered this from, the Esquire, I just told him, dude, I need it to be a telly instead. Do you have a regular telly body? And he goes, the only one I have is ash. And I said, that's fine. Just get it to me as fast as possible. He said, well, it had to be a solid color. And he sprayed it black, and it was like, as fast as he could put a guitar together. And it was like, yeah, that changed my life overnight when I got this guitar because I was never a telly guy before that.
Man, yeah, being I mean, it's funny because talking to you about tellies now, it was a Premier Guitar article that came out about you.
Mhm.
It was around the same time that I was getting really into Telecasters, and I saw your black telly in the article. I was like, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
I want like and you were one of my favorite players at the time, and so I wanted a telly like yours, but it's like, but it has to be it has to be different. So I figured the opposite colors were kind of maybe the
That's
way to
funny.
go.
Dude, well, I was just in denial, I think, of the telly most of my life. I knew it was right for me, and I kept putting it off until it just was so clear. Okay, yes, I'm a Telecaster guy, But it
I
took it's prodding, you know.
it's I'm still it's funny because I was watching one of your Instagram live videos the other night, and someone had asked this question like, do you ever they're asking like, is it your main guitar? Do you have multiple guitars? And I remember because I'm at a point with this guitar that like we're married now, and it's a really
Yeah,
healthy relationship, and I'm happy. But there used to be times where it's like it felt like a couple months a year, it's like we didn't get along, and I would pick
uh
it
huh,
up, and it didn't really feel right. And it's like maybe I'm not a telly guy, maybe I want something else, even now, like I still sometimes fantasize. Maybe I want a 335 kind of thing. Maybe I'll see Adam Levy play, and I'll be like, yeah, a
right.
335, cool. But then you go back to the telly, and it's so solid, and it just feels so reassuring, and there's just something really special about the simplicity of them that I'm just trying to embrace and
Dude,
accept.
they're magic, man. There's no guitar. It's two things for me. Number one, there's no guitar that I can take to literally any scenario. It could
Yeah,
be a straight ahead jazz gig, a country gig, a rock gig, a blues gig, soul, R&B, whatever, and I'll be fine. No
yeah,
worries. I'm not scared of any gig with my Telecaster. Can't say that about literally any other guitar. And the other thing is, on this guitar, I sound like me no matter what. There's no thinking. There's no disconnect between my brain and my hands. When I play any other guitar, there's all these outside factors. When I pick up a Strat, it's Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan are screaming at me. When I pick
yeah.
up a 335, BB King and Larry Carlton are screaming at me. It's like they make me think of certain things. And this guitar, there's no thinking involved. And I mean, that's so. Yeah, it's those two things.
Now, do you think that comes from your relationship with that telly specifically, or is it a broad? You think all Telecasters have that appeal?
I don't know. I mean, this one is responsible for me thinking that way. But now, I mean, just to be honest, okay, so now in January, I have a signature guitar coming out with a really big company that I've been working on for like 2 years. And I can't say what it is yet, and it's driving me crazy. But it's a Telecaster, of course, the style of the
Yeah,
guitar, because that's what I consider my home. So that's all I can say about it. It could have been whatever I wanted. It would have could have been anything. But
yeah.
that's where my home lies now, without question.
Man, I'm excited. I'm excited for that guitar.
Oh, dude, I'm so excited, and I've mentioned it now like a couple times like this and a few things, and people are starting to message me like crazy. What's the deal? And I can't say anything, so it's like, yeah, that's cool.
Well deserved.
Thanks, man. All right. So then, okay, now you're a working musician.
Yeah.
You're playing country gigs. You're playing with pop. artist. You're doing demos all the time. When do you start to feel like you find a, like a groove and settle into like your lane as a player and all that?
Man, I'll let you know when it happens. It's like always a process.
It
I do
is.
remember, you know, there's just like there's an appeal to the idea of like finding your sound and finding your lane on the guitar, and it's been tough because through these different worlds that I've come from like the early fingerstyle Chet and Mississippi John Hurt world, which, I mean, we could talk about those early blues players for hours and hours. Like, those guys are
Yep.
my heroes. But at the same time, like, I got into pedals and this other side of guitar through all my NAMM friends and so many incredible artists. Uh, Nick Reinhardt's a huge influence on me, what he does with pedals, and so I've always been between these two worlds. And even now, I've got one band with Adam Levy called Kibby Dango. We released the
Hmm.
record last year, and it's
Yeah.
just two guitars. There's nothing fancier than that, two guitars and microphone. And then a year before that, I did a pickup jazz show where I turned a whole this early 1900s house into one big amplifier. It took like 18 amps to do it. So
Yep.
all higher frequency amps were upstairs. There's a subwoofer down below in the basement, and like different amps in the dining room, living room, and the dining room was more of like a delay centric sound, and I could control things and move them different rooms of the house, and it was this very avant garde and super kind of over the top concept thing. And so anytime I lean into one lane or I think I'm doing a country thing, something will come up the other direction that pulls me that way. And then I was talking to Joe Bonamassa. He's always encouraged me to do like a fingerstyle, just like do a fingerstyle blues record. Like, no one, who wouldn't love that?
Right.
As soon as I think about maybe doing that, some new pedal will come out. It's like, oh man, I don't know, maybe I want to. So I'm still finding my lane. I think
Yeah.
I'm still and but it was after those country gigs that I did feel like I had kind of a voice on the guitar, where if it came time to solo, I had left the period of emulating my heroes and kind of stepped into this new sound of forgetting and remembering certain combinations of all of them into my playing. And
Yep.
that's something that I think it was Steve Jordan who talked to me, or not to me, I heard him talk about the idea that like your sound is a combination of what you remember, but it's equally a combination of what you forget. And if you go and transcribe something note for note, and 6 months later, you'll still have the little tidbits that really stood out. You might not remember every individual note, but it's those kind of the few things you take away from that go into the next thing you learn, and then the few elements of that go into the next thing you learn. So
Yeah. Yeah. You have to do the work, honor those heroes, like build them up in your mind, learn all you can, and then like kind of just disregard it when it comes time to step out on stage and be yourself,
yeah,
because you know that the essence is going to come through no matter what, because you love it. You love them and you love what they've given you, but you have to let it go, at least to the point of where it's not at the forefront of your thought when you're
yeah.
playing. Yeah.
I ride that wave. Sometimes I think I'm there, and then sometimes I'm deep somewhere else learning something or feeling like I should be learning something. So
Yeah.
you know, but it was I'd definitely gotten a lot of country chops. I'd gotten a lot of you know I could play a lot faster than I used to be able to, and that led
Right.
to kind of doing more sessions in LA, meeting more friends. I started working with Tony Berg up at Sound City a few years back. I think I met him through Blake Mills, and he, talking about another person who's unreal at guitar, and he's a super
Yeah.
huge influence on me. But it, it all starts to blur together. I just know there's a while I was on retainer with a pop gig. That was like 2 or 3 years of my life. That was music directing, this very different thing, and that was a great experience. But that kind of took me away from making music and took me away from being creative because I was playing the same 12 songs every night on tour
Right.
for 2 years, and that was a big moment for me when I got off of that gig to decide that, all right, I don't think I want to be the pop touring guitar player guy, you
Yeah.
know, which is
We all, I mean, that's always a decision, and there's this moment where you want to be a working guitar player, you want to make a living, but you have to make a choice at some point. Are you just this guy who's a chameleon, who doesn't have personality and maybe works all the time, or are you just you? And if you get
Exactly.
work in those worlds, it's because they like you and what you do. So maybe you won't get as many phone calls, but they will certainly be more gratifying. But that's a tough decision because sometimes you just want the work.
Yeah.
So it's tough. Yeah.
And you ride that. That's another wave you ride, because once you make that decision, you know, there's going to be those dry months
Oh
or
yes. Oh
longer,
yes.
and
Or
you have a lot of
years.
time. Yeah,
Or
and you
years.
you have a
Yeah.
lot of time to think about that decision you made.
Yeah.
But I never regretted it. I did a lot of pop touring. I did a lot of that thing, that chameleon guitar work where you're half a guitar player and half a prop, and
Yep. Yep.
and no disrespect to it. I have so many great friends that just destroy that world. Like, they're amazing at it, and they can
Hmm.
do things on guitar that I certainly can't. But I came off of the last one of those kinds of gigs really feeling like I just there was more to learn with the guitar. There's more to say with the guitar, and I just knew I wasn't happy. I knew it wasn't for me to be that guy, and that there were guys who did love it and do love it, so they should be on those gigs. So I started
Yeah.
turning those down, and you know, and then the phone stopped ringing, like you said, because it's like, all right, you're not gonna do it. So, and then I had a lot of time to think about if that was the right call. But it was from those decisions that I had time to develop some other projects. I did a Shadows cover band for like a year, where we
Yeah.
just absolutely tried to nail part for part, like the sounds and the songs, and learn. Talk about a learning experience. Hank Marvin's one of the earliest and first guitar heroes, and
Oh yes.
you would think, I certainly thought going into it that, well, it's pretty simple, straightforward surf guitar. Everyone knows this, but it's so melodically driven. There's no room for error. There's no room for, uh, you can't really improvise. And but it was at one of the Jackson Brown came to one of those shows, and we had kind of met a couple times before through Gabriel at Echo Park Guitars,
Hmm.
and I played a Christmas kind of show with this artist Zeberg, and he was a guest artist for that, and we talked about it. Kind of talk. We would always, Jackson's a huge gear nerd, more than
Oh yes, he
anybody
is. Yeah,
realizes,
he is. Yeah.
and I certainly didn't know. And our relationship leading up to when he came to that Shadow show was, he might text me or I might text him, but either way, around 2 in the morning, a reverb link would pop up on one of our phones, and say, "Hey, do you think this is cool?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I think it's pretty cool." And then he'd buy it, and that was our relationship, sending weird Japanese guitars back and forth to each other at, like, in the middle of the night. And but he came to a Shadow show, and it was from there that we kind of talked about, maybe we should work on some songs together, or maybe put together some kind of duo set. And then a month after that, kind of talking about that, he was like, "You should just be in my band for this tour."
Yeah.
And I said, "Yes, absolutely, I would like that." So,
Well, it's funny, man. I've only played with Jackson once, and I don't know. I wouldn't say I know Jackson, but so many of my friends have played with him over the years, and I'm an enormous fan. My parents love Jackson Brown. Some of my first concerts, actually, as a child, were Jackson Brown concerts. We would
no
always
kidding.
go when he would come to South Florida, and then so Jeff Young. I played with Jeff Young for 20 years now. And Val and Mark Goldenberg, and I mean these are all my friends. So it's been interesting. Yeah, I've been in places where Jackson's been there, and then we ended up playing together one time with Jeff at a gig somewhere on a few songs. And but yeah, I'm such a huge fan. I was so happy when you got in there and did that tour, man. And actually, literally in the last 3 days now, I've interviewed Mark Goldenberg, Val, and now you in a row.
No kidding,
Yeah.
man. Those are two of my heroes. I mean,
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. Well, it's a fun gig, man. It's a good chair to be in.
I learn talk about learning a lot and being the worst player in the band. I mean, that was as good of a spot as I could have had.
Oh man, just getting to play those songs is just I'd be happy. They're so great.
Did you the word semi gotten out the incident on the first night of the tour, where
I think I heard something about it.
where yeah, I we had no rehearsals at all with the full. We had, well, there was two kind of full band rehearsals, but we don't have a set list. We don't have, like,
Mhm.
it took months of back and forth with Jackson to get even a few songs kind of sorted out. Like, should I learn these? I ended up just learning all of them as best as I
Yeah.
could. And but the first night of tour, in my first show, I couldn't be more anxious. And they bring out the set list and they hand it to me first. I'm like, okay, cool. It's about 10, 12 songs on here. I know 8 of these. That's pretty. Those are good odds. That's fun. I'm good with
Yeah.
that. So I
Yeah.
take it back to the guys in the green room, and it's Jeff Young, it's Greg Lees, it's Fritz Lueck, and Bob Glob,
Yeah.
and I say, hey, here's the set list for the night. Like, it's gonna be a good show. And then I think it's Bob that says, oh, cool. Is that the first set or the second set? I don't know. I don't know. It's like, yeah, well, we don't have an opener, so Jackson will take the first set. We'll play that, and then we take a break, and then we do the full set after that, and that's like a 2 hour show. No one had told this to me, and then the show almost got canceled because of weather. But the Jackson demanded that we play anyway, and so he made it happen, and we're on stage. And as I'm plugging in my guitar the first time, they taped down an entirely new set list, and this is like 20, 30 something songs long. It's crazy. And I'm freaking out. But Greg is right next to my right, and he keeps reassuring me. He's like, I'll tell you I'll let you know the keys beforehand. If there's anything you don't know, we'll be fine. And so we get into a good groove. We're like more than halfway through the tour, or through this show. And I'm feeling semi-confident about how things are moving along. Everything's gone smoothly so far. And then Jackson starts introducing this next song. And I look down at my set list, and it just says Fountains, which I didn't know what that meant. And I turned to Greg and I'm like, hey, so what's this next song? It says Fountains. And Greg, like, totally, like, his face goes pale, and he's like, you didn't learn Fountains? So no, I mean, he sent me so many songs to learn. I guess I missed one. He's like, oh man, that's all you. That whole song is you. And it's this, suddenly I'm on. It's the worst nightmare situation. I'm on stage, like, with my hero and this incredible band, and Jackson's introducing this song, and I don't know it at all. And Greg is now strapping on his jazz master. He's like trying to think of what key it is, because he's been playing pedal steel on it for 20 something years.
Right.
So we're preparing for an incident, and I'm preparing to get very fired, like, immediately. And right before, like, Fritz starts counting it off, and then someone in the audience yells something, and Jackson goes, "What?" And they requested a different song, and Jackson goes, "Oh, that's a good song. Yeah, let's play that." And he skipped it, and we didn't play it, and that saved my ass. But I've never been more. That's the scariest moment of my entire life, and that was, so
Yep.
learn all the songs. I
Yep.
guess I don't know what to
Yeah,
take.
but even even the most prepared person can make a mental mistake. I've been there where you fly in to help somebody out do a gig, and you're the fill-in guy, and they send you 28 songs for one show, and you somehow miss one, and they
It's really,
don't play
yeah,
seven that you learned, but they definitely play the one that you somehow missed. You
yeah,
know?
exactly. That's how I. There were so many songs that Jackson had insisted that we were going to play. He told me to bring certain guitars that we were definitely going to use, and it was all different. But that was half the fun. He started calling it "Stump the New Guy," because he
Yeah.
would try to throw a new song out there every night that he knew I didn't know, and uh, so he get a good time with it. But it took me a
Well,
while to
yeah.
get comfortable out there. But once
Well,
I
yeah, and
did,
he had guys who'd been with him for 20 years, so it's like he can throw whatever at them.
yeah, man. I mean, filling in for Val. I mean, those are big shoes. Mark
Yeah.
too. Mark's There's a great video of that every guitar player should watch. I send it to people one day when they ask, like, what does a pro guitar player really look like, and it's a rehearsal of them actually doing that song, Fountains of Sorrow, and they were filming this rehearsal, or it's like a sound check. And for whatever reason, this camera is pretty much on Mark Goldenberg the entire time. But his playing, just start to finish, is so perfect. His solos are perfect, of course, but
Yeah.
The way he responds to the vocal lines, the way he drops out and just fills things in, it's a master class.
Yep.
Everybody should
Well,
check that out. Mark Goldenberg with Jackson Brown, Fountains of Sorrow.
yep. Dude, I told Mark the other day when I first saw him on a gig, it was I'm Alive tour, and he plays that brilliant solo on I'm Alive. That's so simple. And I told him, I'm like, dude, that solo was important to me as a kid. And he goes, you realize Jackson comped that solo? Like I had to take it 30 times and Jackson comped it together. And it's like, I was like, you just ruined it for me. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe that he's known to be particular in the studio.
Yep.
He has amazing ears. I've still to this day never met anybody with ears like Jackson's. He hears everything.
Nice, man. Well, that sounds like fun and a nightmare at the same time.
Exactly the best way to describe it.
All right, let's get into my 10 questions.
Great.
All right, number one. When you first started learning and playing, was there a song, a lick, just anything, a little idea that when you figured it out and you got it under your fingers, it really just like set the hook like, "Oh my god, I'm so proud of myself. I can't believe I just got this. That's it. There's no turning back, you know."
Man, I think there's two big ones. One that every guitar player goes through, and it's just that thing, just the when you bend that,
Yeah.
because that's just on every rock and roll record ever,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's just a sound that you can't really. Of course, I'm out of tune, and I sound like I've never played it before, but I remember the first time I did that, and that was a moment where I just felt so cool. It was like unlocking a cheat code or something to my life. It
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
oh my god, like that thing. Like I don't know, that was a big one. I was maybe like 2 weeks into playing guitar, and
Right.
that blew my mind. But a big one for me was finally nailing the intro to Alice's Restaurant, the Arlo
Okay.
Guthrie tune, fingerstyle,
Yeah.
because it's
Wow.
he's not he's not recognized for his guitar playing, but Arlo Guthrie is a monster fingerstyle guitar player. He can
Hmm.
play stuff that I still haven't heard a lot of. I mean, there's Buster B. Jones and there's Guy Van Duzer. There's some great fingerstyle players that are even including Arlo still alive, but never heard anyone play some of the stuff that Arlo does. And that intro, just that. But
Yeah.
that walking down chromatic thing, like being new at guitar in general, and not understanding really theory on a level where chords kind of made sense and moving between ones to dominant twos to just any of that language that we take for
Right.
granted now. When I figured that out, I remember like my girlfriend at the time like playing it for her at lunch during school, and just her being proud and me feeling so proud of myself because it's just something I spent hours. I was a huge Arlo Guthrie fan, and there's just something about that song and that part that seemed like it was one of those things that I told myself I'll never be able to do.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of things on guitar, and it's so important to face these things head on. Even now, I have to push myself through them. Where when you're going into learning something, it seems impossible. Just like I
Mhm.
have no idea how to play this. And then when you get to the other side of it, and not only can you do it, but it's actually not easy, but you get it. It's in your hands. That feeling, that reward, is so worth it every time. And I think that was maybe the first big one for me.
That
So
feeling is it's the greatest feeling when
it
you
is
look at something from the beginning and you think, no way, no way I'll ever pull that off. And then, a week later or whatever, or a day later, even sometimes, depending on you grow fast, it's like, holy cow, I got this, and it's so gratifying. So,
100%. Yeah,
and if anything, it just makes you go further because it's like you get so inspired to know this is possible.
exactly. It's important. That's the momentum. People talk about practicing or how to practice. I'm still, I go through waves of being good at it and being bad at it. And they want to know, well, do I practice scales? Do I practice modes? I said, whatever, to me, it's whatever is going to give you that feeling. Whatever thing
Yep.
seems kind of the hardest or the furthest away, chase that. Because if the reward you get from that is what inspires you to
Yep.
pick it up again the next day. And that's the momentum you want to maintain.
Yeah, the most important thing about practicing is not how many hours you practice or what necessarily you practice specifically. It's are you practicing something that is really interesting to you and exciting because that's what keeps you motivated to continue moving forward and putting in the time.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Number 2. What's the first solo you ever learned note for note?
Oh man. Let me think about that. If it wasn't a Mark Knopfler thing, it was. Actually no. I remember learning the solo from Electric Light Orchestra's "Mr. Blue Sky"
Wow.
because that
That's a
solo,
completely oddball one.
it's just so melodic and cool, and it's just a. Uh, what how does it go? I see. I haven't. Uh,
That's
whatever.
it.
I don't remember.
That's it. Yeah.
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 Some whatever. But it just sounded cool. It just was, in such a, I was really into that music and that song, and I think it was also because it's not that it sounded easy, but being where I was, the guitar, it's like I think I could figure that out. I remember sitting on the couch in my living room and just playing that over and over again. But that was probably the first one that once I figured it out, I just played like 100 times that day because it just felt so good.
That's a good one, man. See, I wouldn't have thought that would be the one, but it does. It makes sense to me. It's incredibly melodic, but incredibly simple. It's something you could see. You'll never forget it. You'll sing it in your head forever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Everybody can sing that song. Guitar players and non-guitar players, they can all, hum that solo, and I think
absolutely. Yeah,
that's
100%.
important. What was
Yeah.
your just what I don't What was your first solo?
It was probably a BB King solo first. I remember learning like live at the Regal solo from "It's Your Own Fault," which was
Uh-huh.
important to me. I remember learning Stevie solos by heart, but that came a little later. I remember Albert King, "Born Under a Bad Sign," and then
Yeah,
another one actually that was really important to me as a kid was learning AC/DC. "You Shook Me All Night Long." And I'll
dude.
never forget it forever. Yeah, I can play the entire solo right now, no problem. It's like it's stuck in my head so much, you know. Yeah, it's like that freaking, you know. But whatever, and it keeps going. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I'll be 70, and I'll remember that solo note for note. You know.
See, the one that I think I still like, if you ask me to play like in the moment, at any given moment, it would the Good Times Bad Times solo. Jimmy
Oh,
Page.
that's a good one. Yeah.
That's such a good. That's still my favorite solo he does. It's the first song on their first record. It's
Yep.
got that Leslie sound on the solo. Exactly. It has everything you want in a guitar solo. It's so good. That one note that they do, he pans at it from, the it's like I said, coming out of it, Mike It Loud, and being just like, you know, Jack White, the Edge, those guys, great, they're cool, but oh my God, Jimmy Page is the coolest person on the planet. And then hearing that solo from that song, and of course there's John Bonham's drumming on that song, which is just it's
Unbelievable.
unbelievable. But that
It's their
solo is
first
like,
song on the first record, and it's probably my favorite Zeppelin song ever.
same, same.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. What's the first thing you play when you pick up a guitar? Do your hands just go somewhere? Mine do. You know,
You
and
have
it's
that E chord you do
yeah, all the
with
time.
the
Yeah,
with the nine on top, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, I almost remember how you do it too. It sounds so good when you do it, but it's not that. That was terrible. Man, I'm so out of tune. You sound so good. Yeah, there it is.
It
I
used
hear
to
that.
be always like something like that, you know? Yeah.
I mean, mine's always going to be because oftentimes if we're talking about picking up a different guitar or someone else's guitar and you kind of figuring out what it wants
Yeah.
or what it feels like,
Yeah.
really just those just what's ringing out. That's a good one. just what can give me complex, what could I take away from this guitar, and then of course it'll end up being some kind of fingerstyle thing. I mean, anything. Man, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what I do on guitar now. It's like I've never played guitar before.
When you sit down and watch TV with a guitar in your hand, what just comes out?
Oh,
Without
it's always
thinking
gonna be
about
like
it.
a Knopfler thing.
Yeah,
That's what I'm always doing right hand stuff.
yeah,
'Cause you can sit there without your left hand, and you could be, with the remote and just. So I'm always,
yeah.
anything I do with my right hand, but I don't know. It's even just G chords. I love cowboy chords. I love
Oh yeah.
just anything you could really hear what the guitar is doing and what the guitar wants. I don't know. Just
Yeah.
letting the guitar kind of tell you what it wants to do.
Yeah, of course. All right, that's good. Good answer. So maybe you might have answered this next question in there with that Mark Knopfler boogie type thing. But
Uh huh.
what do you just hear when you're cooking eggs or when you're in the car? I hear a shuffle at all times. I just hear ba-doom, 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 and I hear like an improv just do-do-do-do-da, I can't help but hear this long string of single note swinging improvisation. Did you hear stuff like that all day long?
I wish mine was as cool as yours, because that's having a shuffle all the time probably means your pocket's really good. Mine's like I'm just always thinking of like not inversions, but just colors of chords. It's like just listening to something like I tremolo all of a sudden. Like Rachmaninoff stuff is always kind of in my head. The way he's transforming keys or transposing to different
Yeah.
emotions, and all those kind of movements. And I'm always listening for that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
new ways. Someone showed me. There's one recently that just was so cool and musical and simple, which is actually kind of similar to that. Um, if you were walking up and then you sharp five, everyone knows this sound. It's Roy Orbison, whatever,
Yeah.
to the dominant, and then you can go to the four, but then you do the same thing there. And this is where it goes back to Rachmaninoff, because your ear, like you want to, that should be going to the relative four of that, but you use your dominant, the seven, to become the third of the one again. And then, anyway, it was just this ascending, really beautiful piece that I had heard, and the way melodies could play against it, and the way it could really build, and that was something that really I couldn't get that out of my head for like two weeks, 3 weeks. It was just some musically
That's a
interesting.
it's a good thing to have rolling around in there all the time, though. I mean, yeah, for me, the last few weeks, it's been something similar. Actually, for the last few months, I got sucked down the Barry Harris rabbit hole again on diminished sixth. So I've been just hearing 8 note scales in my head quarterly all the time. It's like
That's
what I'm
cool.
hearing right now. Yeah.
Now, is it possible? Can you hear your 8 note scales over a blues shuffle?
Oh yeah, you can hear that stuff over a blues shuffle,
Really?
but like improvisationally wise. So I'll hear it in single notes over a blues. So I'll replace the D with I mean I'll play like so there I used like I used the two as a diminished chord, to lead me to the to four really, and then I used the flat five to get to the five, and then I used the flat six as the one. You know what I mean? That special note in that the Barry Harris scale or whatever. But yeah, I hear it as like a single note thing. The great thing about 8 note scales is they just work out rhythmically so well. You know,
That's so
you
cool.
because all music is in fucking 4/4, so it's like it's a great way to break things up. And dude, when you listen to old school jazz, like voice leading, real like intros of songs, connecting the dots, chord melody, then
Yeah.
it's like wow, this makes so much sense. Thinking that way with that 8 note scale, it's like yeah. But I had forgotten about it, and then it popped up on my YouTube, and it was like, oh yeah, let me watch this again, and it was like, oh, the next 2 months are gone, Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
It's funny because it is that early jazz and those early players and the way the chord melody and the chord voicings they would use that was just still so cool to me. Because it was
It's
before, it was before the guitar was given the spotlight
oh
entirely.
yeah,
So their solos were always a little like those early Charlie Christian solos are all groove. They
yeah.
just feel so good.
Well,
And
and all those chords are based off of sixth chords, not major sevens. They were playing sixth chords mostly as the root chords and the tonics and things like that. And so you just ended up with basically what's so brilliant about this scale is it's just 1/5 over and over and over again. But you're playing basically one, and then you're playing two diminished seven, and then you're playing three, but three is really one with a five in the bass. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And yeah, it's a C6, but it's really a G7 flat nine. You know what I mean? It's like so you're playing 1/5 over and over again, and all of us it's eye opening. Like, wait a minute, I can work my way through the entire scale by playing just 1 and 5 over and over and over again without a lot of motion. But that's what when you hear those brilliant, intros that guys play to tunes on piano on old school
yeah.
jazz, that's what they're doing. That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, that's it's funny because it was an Eldon Shamblin trick actually. He talked about uh, a guitar player's best friend could be broken down into a one chord and a two chord, and you're like, what do you mean by that? It's like going up a scale if you're in G, and then you want to go up, that you can go to your two, and then go to your one again, and then your two, and then your one, and then your two, and he would go all the way up, and he could do all these great solos. He's like, but I'm just doing G and A minor the whole time, and he had these
Mm-hmm.
great complex sounding voicings, but
Yep.
it's always I know a lot of musicians, or maybe it's a stereotype that I assigned that made me intimidated by jazz early on, where I thought that jazz was about how complex you could make things and how just off the wall you could get, and that was intimidating. It was kind of stressful, as a young and new guitar player when I was first getting into it. But it was the more I studied and listened to the greats and talked to people about it was kind of the other direction. It's like, how much color can we, throw at this wall with the least amount of, it really is just a couple simple things. It's one or two notes that are changing that can completely change the vibe or the energy of the chord, and so many of those chords are relative majors and minors of each other, or the
Oh
two.
yeah.
It's really very almost compact. Like there's not, there's
It's
yeah,
very compact. It's the thing that gets complicated is what you play when you actually land. Then you got a
yeah,
lot of options. You can play complex shit. You can go crazy. But the thing that makes what's so special is the way they're going through. They're connecting one thing to the next with just these a million variations on, but basically very simple formulas. The
yeah,
same thing Rachmaninoff is doing, or all these guys. They're creating a bridge between chords, either diatonically or non-diatonically, but some pleasing way. And then, yeah, when you land on a chord as an improviser, you got to know something to play. But man, it's all about the connection.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right, number 5. We talked about this already, but it's a good question. When did you feel like you started to break away from those influences, like you said, and your voice started to come out?
I would probably I felt really reassured in my playing in a way that felt like it was my playing when I really started playing with Adam Levy uh, weekly, because he became a big hero of mine.
Hmm.
I would come and see him play in LA, and I kept trying to figure out ways to talk to him and especially play with him. And so we started doing lessons. And he's such a, if you don't know Adam Levy, he's I mean you know him, Josh, but I'm just
Hmm.
trying to describe him. He just has this very calming presence about him outside of the guitar, but then when he plays, he's just unbelievable, and there's so much energy, and he's just like this Buddha almost of guitar, where he's so wise and quiet and calm, but he says so much with his playing, and that was really inspiring to me. So I kind of tricked him into playing a gig with me, because after a lesson I was like, we should play, music together sometime, like a gig. He said, yeah, that'd be great. Um, so maybe like once a week. He's like, man, the only times I have available is like 8:30 in the morning on Wednesdays. So, oh, that's a crazy coincidence. That's me too. And but I just wanted to play with him, but that was his only slot. And he's a talk about someone who's committed. He gets up at like 5 in the morning. He'll go for a walk. He'll meditate. He'll practice. He'll learn the song, and he'll write something. Then he'll like take another walk, and then he might play guitar again. He has so much time in the morning, so that I Wednesday mornings I would wake up at 8:15, get in my car, still like half asleep, and get to the gig exactly on time to start playing. But by that period in time, he's already been up, he's practiced, he's really centered himself musically, he's got something he's working on, and that kind of preparedness and playing with someone on that level every week and in such a bizarre time of the day or the morning, kind of putting myself in an uncomfortable position. I learned a lot really quickly, and the rules of that band were like no set lists, like nothing prepared, like, and no stress. Like we're not gonna worry about it. We're just gonna show up and we're gonna play. But we do, you know, we do have to play songs. So doing that once a week for like the last 3 years. Adam just moved to Brooklyn, so we're
Yeah.
kind of on hiatus until otherwise. But I learned a lot from him and watching him play and playing with him, and I would have something to kind of take away each morning after we had played, and it was kind of through him and the confidence I would get through him that I kind of figured out what works for me, what feels confident melodically, and when I kind of felt like all of my influences coming into one place, because there wasn't a bunch of pedals, there weren't anybody else's songs, there were no professional requirements. It was just show up and play guitar,
Right.
just you and the guitar. We're in this coffee shop, and a lot of the times we're playing acoustic, so we're not even being amplified very well. So it's really at its like the purest sense, like a just a basic guitar gig. So there's nothing to hide behind. There was no audience to impress for the most part. Um, so it was basically a lesson. It was like learning every week with Adam, and
Yeah.
uh, and the stuff that I learned those mornings has really influenced the way I perform at gigs or shows or sessions now. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I would say yeah, it definitely came from Adam. I owe
That's
him that.
nice, man. And it's it's important to state how important regularity is to kind of honing in on what you do. When you do anything regularly, but you're forced to improvise regularly in a setting, and have a sounding board next to you, and you're like not playing what he's
Exactly.
playing, and you're going to automatically start to hone in on what worked for you, because you may play the same song at least from week to week, and you'll hone in on what works, and it's like then you start to find your thing. So I mean, just having the chance to do that is a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I learned a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Number 6. What do you consider your biggest weakness on the guitar? Because
Ooh.
mine is acoustic guitar prettiness. Like James Taylor, like some of the things you probably excel at. But like if I can't be James Taylor, or some like really intricate arpeggiated acoustic guitar, I clam up. It's kryptonite.
I That's funny because I've heard you play acoustic, and you sound great.
I
But
can
I know
solo
what you mean.
on acoustic, but if it's like, man, sit down and play, obviously not Tommy Emmanuel, but yeah, like play something pretty that's, written out maybe, like arpeggiated stuff, finger pick.
Yeah,
It just feels like I get scared, I sweat, you know?
really.
Yeah.
Man, I have a lot of insecurities left to challenge when it comes to the fingerboard. Not necessarily because I don't know music theory. I know I like that. Once like this, we're in it now. Like where I'm already uncomfortable thinking about it. But so much of how I play and how I learned to play came from playing by ear,
Hmm.
and sometimes even to this day, it's like I can slip into a thing where if I'm nervous or something comes up, it's almost like they become two separate things. My music knowledge, my music theory knowledge, and my playing. And the more anxious I get, the further those two get from each other, and I start feeling like the fingerboard gets more and more blank, and I'm suddenly forgetting, what like what key I'm in, or it's like I become very reliant on my dots on the
Uh-huh.
fingerboard, as opposed to knowing truly, you know where notes are, and how to get move across the fingerboard efficiently. Yeah, I still struggle with it sometimes. And it's it's also just kind of the nature of how I learned to play. I when I did the Jackson tour, it's like I had three different guitars tuned. This one tuned a half step down. I had my 52 Tele was in standard, and I had another one a whole step down. And what that allowed me to do was play every song in any key in like first position chords, G, C,
Yeah.
D, E
Yeah.
minor, like because I mean it's a big part of Jackson's music is it's those big chords, and those big exactly. But it also is because that's where I'm really comfortable. I love using capos. I love utilizing open strings. I love letting kind of the nuances of what you can do with these initial basic chords. You could do so much and say so much, and a lot of that came from what I learned from the fingerstyle stuff back then. And
Mhm.
so now, if when I've suddenly gotten more than one time or more than a bunch of times, I've gotten thrown into like a jazz gig, and uh, I can lose my grip pretty quickly if I am not in the zone, and sometimes I'm on it, and sometimes I'm still like, fuck, what key are we in?
Right,
And
right.
so that
Dude, I know
happens.
that feeling. We've all been there.
Yeah,
I know that feeling too. I mean, yeah. Oh
it's
man. All
crazy,
right.
but I'm working on it.
Yep. Well, you sound good to me. I mean,
Thanks, Josh.
dude. So, who's a huge influence on your playing that maybe people would be pretty surprised to hear?
Um,
I guess Green Day, maybe, but who
yeah,
else?
I mean, Arlo Guthrie, I think, is one that people are usually shocked by, but he was a huge influence for me, um, musically and guitar wise. Um, and I'll always say Mark Knopfler, and I think and the surprise is less that people don't know who Mark Knopfler is, but that it's not so much Dire Straits. It's those, his solo records, the record Shangri La, like
Oh yeah,
90% of
it's
what I play
killer.
on guitar, I feel
Yeah.
like comes from that record.
Yeah.
It's a textbook example of just great guitar parts and great guitar tones. It's like the whole thing is either a 54 Strat or his 58 Les Paul, and it's recorded beautifully at Shangri-La Studios up in Malibu.
Yep.
They're great, simple, beautiful songs. Like one of the greatest sounding Strat solos ever is on this song called Our Shangri-La, and it's just a beautiful, simple single note lower string solo on a 54 Stratocaster, and I still go back to that to kind of reset my ears sometimes. But so it's the solo record era of Knopfler that is a big influence. And then who else? Uh,
Any oddball one out of left field?
I was really into Adrian Lake for a while. I don't know if you guys remember.
Yeah, I know that is. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was cool. Um, there's an artist now who I'm obsessed with. This guy Daniel Romano, who if you asked him, in fact, there was a Fretboard Journal interview with him, where they asked Daniel like what guitar he used on his most recent record because the guitar sounds are so amazing, and he's just like, shit, I don't remember, I don't know. He's like such not he's not a guitar guy, and I saw him live, and it was the biggest guitar sound I've ever heard. He was just playing a basic Strat into a huge like '70s silver face Fender stack, and I went and looked at his pedal board afterwards because I'm still that guy, and it
Yeah.
was a tuner and like a Boss fuzz, and it sounded so good.
What's his name? See, this is somebody new to me.
Daniel Romano, he's a monster songwriter. You can't predict. He's released maybe like 9 albums this year. He's out of control. He's
So he's prolific then.
Yeah, he's one of those guys. Self-produces, self-records. Every album sounds different than the other. You don't know what he's gonna do next. He's too cool. You know, he can't
All
tell you
right.
what guitar he used on his records. He's a big one. If I think of anybody else, I mean, Roy
All right.
Smet maybe. I don't know if that's a big
Oh,
one for
that's a good
people.
one. That's a good one. Yeah,
He,
that's a good.
yeah, Big Bill
Yeah,
Broomfield. I don't know.
yeah. Yeah, well, you listen to good stuff, and you don't. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. You don't pigeonhole yourself. You listen to everything.
I try, but I think maybe a funnier way to answer the question is like I think people would be surprised to hear some of the guys I've still never transcribed a Hendrix solo, and I feel really bad saying that, and I especially feel bad saying that to you. But
That's shocking to me. Shocking. But yet, you are not alone. I know other guitar players who have just completely just skipped it. I
yeah,
don't understand it, but I do. I know the other guys like that.
I mean I went deep into Freddie King. I went deep into Albert Collins changed my life, and then you get into guys like Junior Kimbrough, and you get into guys, uh, man, Hound Dog Taylor was huge. All of the guys that Hendrix loved too, I loved, but there just wasn't. I was so busy doing fingerstyle stuff. I was so learning, obsessing with Chet stuff or Mississippi John Hurt. I just never. I don't know. I'm still not. I think I'll get there. I think the Hendrix phase will hit me, and then I'll have to call all you guys up and apologize.
Yeah, yeah. I can thank my dad for Hendrix. I mean, my dad's not a musician, but he just, that's his era. So the records we heard in my house all the time were Hendrix and the Stones and the Beatles and, Clapton and Cream and, Allman Brothers. But Hendrix was really big. And he is a big Hendrix fan. And yeah, he just tripped me out the first time I'm probably 5 years old or something when I remember hearing Purple Haze and registering what's that? You know what I mean? Like that's crazy. Yeah. And Hendrix is talking to guys like I just said about the generations. Hendrix has been with by far the biggest answer to the question like of guys before our generation, why'd they start playing guitar? Oh, it's Beatles or Hendrix. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
always one of those two things. Yeah. Yeah.
it's funny. I promise I'm gonna learn a Hendrix solo really soon.
All right.
It's
Okay,
not the
man. Here's a gear question.
okay.
Would you rather have a great guitar and a shitty amp or vice versa?
Great amp,
Yeah.
no question.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, having a good that's because that's what people are really hearing is the
Yep.
amp.
Yep.
And you can make if you have a shitty guitar, that's just fun. You can make a shitty guitar. I mean, how many great records were made with guys playing like Tyscos or weird silver tones, like
Yep.
you know. Uh, so to me, I'd rather have an amp that I trust and know sounds great, because then you could have all the fun. Just try half of my most recorded guitars in my session, like racket over here, are really bad guitars, but
Yeah.
they sound super cool when you record them. So, but
Yep.
I'm a full believer in good amps.
I'm 100% with you, but we've been split down the middle, 50-50 almost on the
Really? What
answer.
did Val say?
He said guitar.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shit.
He said guitar. A lot of guys have said guitar, saying they need to be comfortable and have, this ability to play all the things that they play. And it's more about the guitar for them. And for me it's the opposite. I know I'll give a better performance with an amp and a rig that I can be comfortable on with any guitar than if I had my guitar and some solid state crate
Exactly.
or something. You'll get a bad show out of that rig. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, we're on the same page.
Good. I'm glad we're still friends.
All right, man. Number nine. What keeps you pushing forward? Is it just that you love this thing so much, but or is there something that makes you keep working on new things? You know, I'm super obsessed with being better tomorrow than today. But what keeps you pushing like that? What are you looking for? Where are you going?
Some sometimes I think I've got like a deep cause or drive, and it's like what fuels everything. And then sometimes I think like maybe I'm just not that bright, and I can't operate beyond like I've turned my brain into one guitar machine. Like that's just all my brain can do now is think about guitars. So maybe I've just rewired myself to the point that that's like the only way I can see forward is
Hmm.
with a guitar in my hands. But
Okay.
you know, but if it's not that, we can put that aside. Maybe it truly is that I just I mean, like I said, when I that feeling I had when I first picked it up that morning. Not only do I still feel that way about guitar, but it's still that feels like it was yesterday. Like it's made my life so. I love what I get to do. I wake up being so stoked to be a guitar player because I was such a huge nerd and not really there were kids in school that I definitely thought were cool and other people thought were cool, and I understood that I was not one of them. And guitar to me was something that was cool, and only cool people did leather jackets and that whole thing. And so I felt like when guitar hit me I had this connection with it. It just was reassuring, and it kind of was like, man, guitar isn't a guitar is what you make it, and I could do what I want with this, and I just felt so invited to it, and like just bonded, and I still feel that way. I'm just so in love with guitar, and the more I've gotten obsessed with it and dug into the history, the people who spent years obsessing about Leo and Freddie Tavares and all those early guys at Fender, and then Ted McCarty and all the important guys at Gibson and what they did. The history just gets cooler and cooler. The more you learn about it, the more the
Yep.
stories are just unbelievable. I've been digging into Japanese guitar history recently, and there's the stories for that are unbelievable. So to me, it's just a gift that keeps on giving, and
Yep.
so I will always love guitar. I definitely, and especially with what's going on in the world right now and being holed up most of this year, it's challenged a lot of how I feel in terms of like I love guitar, but man, does do people need to hear it? Do people need to hear me play guitar? There's so many great guitar players, out there, and do I, am I really contributing to the cause, or am I just the world's biggest fan? You know, and I went through 3 months where I like was kind of playing but not, and I was just drawing a ton.
Hmm.
Um, kind of trying to figure out if I wanted to still play or if I should still play or if maybe people have heard enough of me, and then I came out the other side of that really excited about guitar in a different way, and finding new things to explore on it. And so at this point I kind of just have a like an agreement with the guitar, or maybe with myself, but where it's just like, I trust you, I trust we're in this together. It's like I said, this is a marriage, and
Oh, dude, absolutely.
we're just gonna do this, and wherever it takes, I'm really happy with guitar, and
Yep.
there's a lot of people I think are still trying to find their thing, or maybe spend their whole life finding their thing, and I feel lucky that I've had this for as long as I've had, and that I've been
Yeah.
able to make a career out of it. So
Dude, it's a lucky, definitely a lucky thing to have found your purpose at such a
yeah,
young. I feel thankful for it every day. I mean, I got
exactly.
this thing when I was 3 years old, and it's like it's been my purpose ever since. And so my personality is I'm gonna always be working hard because I want to be. If I do something, I want to be as good as I can be at it, and so I'm pushing at it. But then the other side of it is I almost feel like a duty to this guitar, like I owe it to the guitar because to put as much effort as I can because the guitar is directly responsible for all the good things in my life,
Yeah,
literally all of it. I
yeah,
wouldn't have my wife, which means I wouldn't have my son, I wouldn't have my house, I wouldn't have my friends. I wouldn't have, it's like it's directly tied to everything great in my life. So I owe it all of my effort.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. That really strikes the chord, no pun intended, of the feeling. Just
Exactly.
like, man, I've built my life around this, and it's only been great. Like,
Yep.
um, I remember someone was asking me, it was my girlfriend. We were talking about the Wrecking Crew, and those guys were the coolest. Tommy Tedesco, that whole group, legends, and they made tons of money,
Yep. Yep.
And my girlfriend was like, "Aren't you? Does it make you feel, I don't know, bitter or something that like people doing your same job, a few decades ago were just rolling in it, and 2020 here we are, and it's maybe slightly guitar's not maybe as lucrative, and I still feel like I think it's the same. I think it's relative. I think to be a guitar player, to be a professional musician, to make any money at all at it, to have a career where people respect you, and like that thing you're saying earlier, where they call you because they want you to play. They don't just need the chameleon; they want your sound. It's like I feel like I'll take it relatively. It's like
Yeah.
maybe financially isn't the same, but the
Yeah.
reward to me is the same, and I feel so lucky, and I love it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna be playing guitar for a while.
Yeah. And we're not saying we don't want to make money. We want money. We
No,
want good gigs.
yeah.
But
The royal you should pay
yeah.
more.
Yeah. But we'd be doing it anyways. That's the point.
Yeah.
All right. So that leads me to number 10 then. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Is it just keeping on? Or is it growing greatly? You got a goal in mind? You have somewhere you're trying to reach, something maybe as an artist, something as a side man. Where are you headed, man?
That's a tough question. A friend asked me that. Right, Ryan Lerman, guitar
Uh-huh.
player.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. He was asking me that earlier because Ryan is a hero to me in that he is 5-year plan, 10-year plan. That guy is
He's a
so,
very motivated and driven individual.
yeah, and it's worked for him, and
Yeah.
it's very impressive to see what he's pulled off with Scary Pockets and the artists that he's MD'd and toured with. He's
Yep.
very driven, and he always pressures me when I'm in my moments of doubt or trying to figure out what I'm doing. He's asked that same question: "What do you want to be in 5 years?" And at this point, like I've kind of categorized it where it's like, okay, if I can be in a band, long term, I would love that. I would love just to be the Lindsey Buckingham of a Fleetwood Mac. How cool would that be?
Yeah.
It's what Jimmy Page being a session musician is what motivated me to do it. The idea that like, oh well, he went and built all these relationships and he developed himself as a player, and then when the time was right, like he put together this great band. And there's still parts of me that love that and love that idea of like, just, man, being in a band sounds super cool.
Hmm.
So I can compartmentalize that into like I would love to be in a band. But I will say when I'm like in the studio, on a great, like working on a really cool project that I'm excited about, you know, with an artist and with people in the room that are all there, and we're really just throwing ideas out there, and just coming up with new sounds, and you hear it back. You go to try something in the room and you hear it back in the monitors and it sounds huge, and like that feeling when you're in it, all those nights that where the phone wasn't ringing or you weren't sure what you were going to do, or do I want to be in a band, or like all of that melts away, and you just are the only thought that's there while you're listening back to all this stuff is, man, I love what I get to do, and I love this.
Yep.
So I I do plan, and I'm working on releasing an album of songs, on my own, mostly for the sake of doing it, just to kind of check that off and see what that feels like and pursue that. I
Right.
would love to be in a band, but if I really knew what I had a plan, I'd tell you. But ultimately, it's just chasing that feeling. It's just chasing that moment in the studio where things just, time kind of goes away, and all you can think about is how great this song is, or how cool it is to be here.
Yeah.
Studio coffee, nothing tastes better than coffee in the studio, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Student. I mean, it's a great feeling when you You walk into the control room after a take that you already know is the one,
Yeah,
and that it comes up on the mains, and you're like, yeah, yeah, this was, there is magic in this. There's magic.
100%. And so, yeah, I'm still developing a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan. But
All right, all
I
right.
mean, if you had asked me that question 10 years ago, I, wouldn't have even dreamed that I would get to do some of the things that I've done now.
Yeah,
I would.
absolutely.
I remember when I was 17 or 18, and I made a goals list at the time, and one of the goals I wrote down was by the time I'm 30, I want to play in, you know, a band, not a famous band, not like a known band, but just to convince any group of guys who have bass and drums and a microphone to like let me play with them. If I could do that by the time I'm 30, that's gonna be great. So I'm 29 now, and I've done so much more than I thought I could. So I'm hoping that 5 years from now, I'm doing more than I, you know,
Nice.
hoped I could, sitting here now. So stay
That's a
tuned.
good, that's a good attitude to have, man.
We'll see.
Nice. All right. All right. So thank you. Members, thank you for watching. And if you're not a member, hit join here because there's going to be a video after this where Mason and I teach you a couple licks. We're gonna get to the essence of the Mason Stoops sound. So
Oh
think
man,
about what you want to play. But anyways, thank you, dude, for doing this. It's a pleasure talking to you and being your friend. And I appreciate you taking the time out of your day.
no, Josh, you're a hero of mine, and it's an honor to be here and talk to you about the things that you and I would be talking about anyway. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
I figured I talk about this stuff all day long anyways. Might as well do it and try to try to get some something whatever, something out of it. Who knows? Maybe other
totally.
people will enjoy it.